Welcome back to Grade 8 Geography, Unit Number 2, Global Inequalities, Economic Development, and Quality of Life. This is Lesson Number 21, How do Governments Affect Quality of Life? Everywhere in the world, people count on their government to do a lot of things, from defending their borders to providing clean drinking water. People have a right to expect these things as they pay taxes to give their government the money and ability to make decisions that will improve their quality of life. In many countries, governments fail to provide a good quality of life for their citizens. In developing countries, governments do not have much money to work with. As well, governments sometimes make poor choices that do not benefit anyone. Sadly, there are too many governments that put themselves ahead of their citizens. These governments will use tax money to give their members higher salaries, and they will use tax money to start or fund wars. And this leads to the rise and the spread of what is known as corruption. All countries around the world face the problem of corruption. Corruption happens when government officials use their power to be dishonest with their citizens or to commit illegal activities. When there is corruption in a country, there is less money to provide services such as healthcare and education. And this map shows the levels of perceived corruption in different countries. By perceived corruption, that means what people feel the level of corruption in their country is like. It doesn't mean that they're completely accurate, it's what they feel is the level of corruption in the country in which they live. So, comparing Canada to other countries that are marked in darker colors, how do Canadians feel about corruption in their country? There are different methods that can be used to fight corruption. Researchers and organizations in one country can help people in other countries expose corruption in their governments. Organizations like Transparency International lead the global fight against corruption by calling for greater government transparency. Transparency means making information visible and easy to access. A growing number of politicians are aware that they need to show people that they are concerned with making their decisions and their actions transparent. A growing number of citizens and organizations are arguing that Barack Obama has failed to fulfill his promise of making the U.S. government more transparent. This was one of President Obama's biggest promises. He promised the American people that they would have a much greater understanding of what the government was doing and how it was collecting and spreading information. Corruption decreases quality of life and discourages positive economic activity. Corruption happens in a variety of ways. Corruption can take many forms. Some government officials steal money. Some officials give contracts to businesses who offer bribes. In these cases, the businesses that offer the bribes may not be the most qualified company, and the people suffer from poor quality goods or services. Many people, particularly in developing countries, have to pay bribes to start a new business or pay the police to allow them to sell goods. This means that people's job opportunities are limited, incomes are smaller, and the overall quality of life is lowered. To create change, many citizens hold protests against government corruption. These citizens appeal for and receive support from organizations like Transparency International. Today, most countries around the world are independent or mostly independent. It was not always like this, however. As we have learned in history class, many countries were originally colonies. Those are regions controlled by a handful of very powerful nations. The colonial powers, or countries that controlled the colonies, made profits by taking all or much of their colony's natural resources and making goods which they could sell for profit. When the colonies were given their independence, many suffered from the loss of their natural resources. This has been felt especially in parts of Africa and Asia, as countries in these two continents have struggled to build industries. Government corruption in these countries has been very high, as governments were set up by military forces and people were never given a chance to vote for their leaders. And just looking as late as 1945, we could still see whole sections of the globe that were colonies that were ruled over primarily by the European powers. When governments do not have enough money to operate, they borrow money from other countries. This owed money is referred to as foreign debt. Unfortunately, many developing countries have very high levels of foreign debt for a variety of reasons. Large foreign debts are the result of recovery from a natural disaster, government corruption, the cost of war and rebuilding from a war, as well as high interest rates charged by countries that lend money. Sadly, many developing countries are unable to pay off their debts, and they are forced to borrow even more money from one country to pay a debt to another country. Governments that have a high level of foreign debt resort to charging higher taxes, even to its poorest citizens. This makes the problem of poverty in their countries even higher. In the end, money is not being spent to develop the economy or improve quality of life. So let's finish this video by considering the following. Do you think that erasing or getting rid of a developing country's foreign debt would improve their quality of life? What other things would have to be done to help improve a developing country's quality of life? I want you to put the video on pause and think about this question. Write down some ideas. This might be a question where you need to talk with a parent or another older relative to help you out. But we will discuss this in the beginning of tomorrow's class. So put the video on pause now. And until tomorrow's class, this concludes today's video.